The nationwide protests for racial justice are also igniting a reckoning in the classroom and among some of the most prestigious private schools in the country. Alumni from these institutions include Kerry Washington, Anderson Cooper, and Ivanka Trump. But behind these walls, past and present students of color say there was racism, and now they're sharing their pain publicly, although often anonymously through social media accounts like this one, run by Io Lewis, a Brearley alum.
And what was the purpose of creating an account like this?
It's not vindictive. Our purpose is to hold the school accountable in a way that it hasn't been held before.
One of the first accounts to launch, setting off an online movement, was Black at Chapin, where graduates of the all-girls Chapin School in New York City recalled racist moments that stuck with them, some even for decades. One post reads, "In 4th or 5th grade, when we learned about slavery, our teachers made us play a game in which you played as a slave on a plantation, and the goal was to escape."
It's challenging growing up in that environment and being different and being othered. I think there's a lot of being othered in that community.
So that sense of invisibility, that sense of I'm a person of color, but do I belong in these spaces? Am I acknowledged in white spaces or in POC spaces? That was my biggest racial takeaway.
A recent education profile showed that more than 50% of white students in New York City attend private schools, compared to about 9% black students. Dalton School alum Zuri Washington says a Manhattan private school she attended emphasized diversity.
It has the glossy veneer of diversity,
but not enough.
They don't really put their money where their mouth is.
Dalton issued a statement saying the school stands with our community members who are speaking out about discrimination and systemic racism, adding, "We will continue to have real and actionable conversations about what black people and other people of color have experienced at Dalton, and we are holding ourselves accountable." There's a growing list of schools being held to a higher standard when it comes to racial equity, including those in Atlanta. Allison Burns co-created Black at Lovett.
We all just saw that we have a lot of the same experiences, whether that be, with racial slurs in the hallway or with the same teachers and administrators. So we really wanted to highlight that to start the conversation.
Administrators say they're listening. In response to the testimonies, Lovett shared a message to its community, writing, "We must acknowledge the fact that our school has not been a safe and welcoming place for all the students in our charge. Many have left our gates and still walk our hallways feeling like they don't belong. The Lovett School is committed to doing more." Back in New York, the Chapin School tells us self-identifying students of color make up about 50% of the student body. Officials say they're committed to taking concrete actions immediately, like recruiting and retaining more black teachers, cultivating curricula of inclusion, and mandating diversity training for all students, faculty, and staff. Brearley apologized to all members of our black community and promised similar steps.
We are going to be working with the school, not just for the next couple of weeks, while there's all this momentum, but for as long as it takes for us to see change in our community and at our school.
A turning point in our country, becoming a learning lesson for schools, pushing them to improve the student experience.
All right, so I know we've already kind of dealt with the topic of microaggressions, but I think that second question, how can we promote awareness and education? Ladies, if you can share your thoughts on that.
I can go first. I think a great way that my school is actually making strides to promote education and awareness about this issue is that we have a group, a club that's called the Anti-Racist Coalition, and it's actually a space for white students to come together and try to work to be more anti-racist. And I think that is a great space that is provided at my school because it takes away the burden from students of color and particularly Black students to educate these white students, which can be very taxing and exhausting, like Uche mentioned. So I think that's one way that institutions can try to sort of promote this knowledge to sort of stop these experiences that we are having at these schools.
And sorry, just really quickly, Marlon, so I know in our planning discussion, one of the things that you mentioned is that this doesn't change even in the workplace. It sometimes becomes worse. So if you can maybe talk a little bit more about like how maybe employers, or as you're an educator as well in the institution that you are in, like what can institutions of places of work, and also educational institutions, what can they do to kind of make this better?
Yeah, thank you. I personally, I think there needs to be an update. Me personally, I have an online school, so I'm a little biased on this, but I don't like even using the word anti-racist. I think it still focuses on race being the bona fide issue, and not saying that race does not exist, but the racial construct does not exist. It's the race, just whether if you look at a cat, if you look at a black cat or a white cat, you don't attach any meaning to them being black or white, right? And I think that more issues dealing with stuff like that is important, because I know that when when you're in these situations and everything is like race, everybody's always so they're trying to understand what race is about and why race is, what does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be white in these spaces? And what does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? And I always tell people it really means as much as a black cat and a white cat, right? And I think that that's the kind of explanation that I think we need to kind of put in these schools, right?
For me, I think a lot of ever since June of 2020, I think my school has been taking a lot of great strides. So I think a good way of taking the burden off of all students within to talk about these issues is really giving the opportunity for people who actually want to actually work on diversity and equity and inclusion in our schools the space to do that. And my school has done that. So we have a board called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Board, and students can be nominated on that board and help create change through sharing information and then working directly with school administration as well. But apart from the students' job, there have been a lot of training sessions where teachers on off days get trained on sexuality and how to deal with race in our school, and how to set boundaries with students, and how to cater to students, and how to acknowledge experiences. And then finally, a lot of the work has been done again by teachers themselves, putting diverse books into curriculum and these electives that we get to choose. So I think the teachers, and then some student population and administration.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add like one more quick thing. I think it was kind of mentioned in one of the comments earlier, but I think also just kind of having more representation like in terms of like the teachers, because I know like for my school, like we have a global studies classes, and like for like the Indian one, like the teacher is like white, and like the only reason that he is a teacher is because like he spent like time like living in India, I believe, and like he obviously knows somewhat about the culture, but like obviously he's not Indian, like he's a white man. And so I think it's important to have like teachers that kind of look like you, so that they can educate their students on like those experiences and like on ignorant comments, so that I guess like the burden is not only put on the students.
Thank you. So, Marlon, if you can go to the next slide, please. Just to kind of continue to talk about those experiences in the school system. So, ladies, anyone can kind of open the floor with this.
Yeah, so like the video mentioned, like there was like a big rise in like these kind of social media accounts where it's like black at this school, da da da, and so they kind of wanted to show posts from our PWIs, and so one of the posts says, in class 3, one of my white peers told me that I looked like a stripper or a hooker because of the earrings I was wearing. There were other white students wearing the same type of earrings. However, she felt it was appropriate to tell me, you should probably take those off. You look kind of hookerish. I think it's funny how she
wears those same earrings nowadays. So like those are just like a few of the different examples of like the Black experience and like just the POC experiences that happen at our PWIs. We just kind of like wanted to highlight these experiences to kind of like show like how we can grow from these and like improve institutions so that we can have fewer of these experiences and make sure that POC and like Black students feel safer.
Yeah, I can share the posts that are from my school. So I'll share this one, which is actually from an alum that actually ended up working at my school. Alum of color here actually worked on campus for a little bit after graduation, got confused for other employees of color a lot, and had to keep an eye on a non-POC kid who was bullying kids of color. Of all people, I was the one who did the most to keep the targeted kids safe. If it were a POC bullying other kids, you would bet the non-POC employees would have taken action and been stricter with the bully and not put it all on one of the only POC employees there during the incident. Didn't go back to Nobles after a higher up told me that I couldn't expect things to be quote-unquote perfect because I did not come from a quote-unquote culture of perfection. Did not feel sad when I never heard from them again. So this sort of details the ways in which discipline differs by race at my school, as Black students tend to face harsher punishments, and also when they are the victims of incidents involving race, there's like less of an effort made by the administration to sort of resolve the issue, which can be very damaging to the experience.
Tope, that was a very powerful point, as you mentioned, how Black students are punished more in the classroom setting, and of course we see how it translates into, with their interactions with the justice system. So thank you so much for bringing that point up. Did anyone else want to say anything regarding this slide before we move on?
Whole point of having this restorative, practices as part of why, of our format that we're doing on this show is because of the prison to the classroom to prison pipeline is real. And when this is what people of color, children of color are facing in white schools. What about what they're facing even in Black schools, where where the resources are not enough, where there isn't all the oversight, where there isn't all the energy to have boards and all the other stuff, because parents in our schools are just trying to work 50, 60 hours a week. In fact, some of our students may be working 40 hours a week, right? And all these factors now compounded with the fact that the teachers do not know, as white students, they don't know, as white people, they don't understand all these microaggressions that they're having. They're able to define the students. Oh, you don't speak very well, but that's so unfair because that's the language that they grew up with. So many microaggressions are there. I can go on and on, but so I just wanted to point out the restorative practices. That's what it's for, so that we can learn how to talk, so our youth of color can learn how to express themselves, be socially, emotionally in tune with some of these microaggressions. When you have all these disadvantages, these little microaggressions are actually can maybe open up big, huge macroaggressions. So just to be very clear.
Yeah, thank you, Marlon. Actually, I would like to go back to one of the questions that was asked previously from my friend Toinia. She asked, why are white institutions, why are they deemed or perceived to be the better institutions? So anyone can kind of chime in.
I think overall, the biggest point that a lot of people like to make is about connections, and then also financial support. So PWIs usually have a better financial aid for a lot of their students, and then they also have better resources, better facilities, especially for research. And finally, better networking, better connections. The world is networking, and to build a career, you have to know how to network and you have to have great connections with people. And a lot of the alum from PWIs are high up in these big companies, and a lot of people who want internships need to network for those. So I think that's why a lot of people say that white institutions are better.
Anyone else
Yeah.
want to tackle that?
Yeah, I agree with Miracle. I was kind of talk about like how I think one of the main reasons, like she said, is just like funding, because they're able to have like these top-notch facilities and like have study abroad programs for the students, and like research opportunities and stuff like that. So it can kind of just like fill your resume up like more than like if you were at like a public school, because you have these opportunities. And so I think that's the biggest problem. And I think that kind of just goes to show like how like we need to give more funding to like obviously like not PWIs and like public schools, so that like all students can kind of have the same opportunities as POC and Black students have at PWIs.